Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Open Door Philanthropy Conference Special. We brought our microphones down to the Nexus U.S. Summit this year at the United States Institute of Peace. And in plain view of the Lincoln Memorial, over the course of 2 days, we conducted 10 interviews with a diverse array of conference delegates. Some of our guests, like Hank Love from the American Jobs Project, were actively fundraising. And I was able to convince Hank to submit a proposal to the unfunded list that's currently under review. Other guests, like Caren and Yanis, were active funders. Caren ran Oprah Winfrey's foundation for 10 years. I was able to convince Caren to join the evaluation committee. We had a bunch of other cool folks sit down with us who were a little bit harder to find. On a personal note, this was just an absolute blast for me. I got the chance to interview some of my favorite people in a beautiful setting. We had amazing conversations. I hope you'll listen and understand that these represent just a microcosm of my own participation in Nexus over the years. I've been attending this conference for almost 9 years now. Each conversation you listen to here, whether I've just met our guest or known them for years, is reminiscent of hundreds of conversations I've had in the halls of Nexus over the years. People ask me often how I've built such an impressive network. And I can tell you that it's because of conversations like these. At the very least, I think you'll find them entertaining. Please note that these were recorded live on site in a less than ideal acoustic circumstance. You can pretty much always hear me because I'm basically Shrek. But sometimes our guests are a little bit harder to hear. We'll do our best to make transcripts available since every word of these conversations were important and interesting. But for now, I hope you enjoy. Okay, I don't think the bell's ever end. Let's just start. I know you're pressed for time. So here we are at Nexus. We seem to be in between sessions, and I was able to grab Caren Yanis, and I'll talk a little bit about it. But your name first came on my radar over 10 years ago. I was the development associate at a place called the Seed Foundation, well, let's start with what you're doing now. What is your name?
Well, first of all, Caren Yanis. I'm the principal of Roland Consulting. I'm based in Chicago, but I work all over the country and actually all over the world. I met Raj Vinakota when I was working with Oprah Winfrey. I was the executive director of the Oprah Winfrey Foundation's and Oprah's Angel Network for 9 years.
Wow.
And Raj had just started the Seed Foundation, and he was on an Oprah show. And
that's right, he was on Oprah's show. I forgot about that.
Raj won the Use Your Life Award.
Yes, he did, yes.
$100,000.
Raj is an evaluator for the unfunded list today.
It was probably in 2005.
Yes.
$100,000. And he went on to do great things, and it's wonderful to see him working with the Aspen Institute, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. A lot of what I know about fundraising, I learned from him. So tell me a little bit about the 9 years you spent working for Oprah. What sort of philanthropy does she do?
So when I was with Oprah, we had the Angel Network, and I helped create a back office operation for the Angel Network. And her viewers were so enthusiastic about the Angel Network that they would send funding in every week when the Use Your Life Award aired. Mm-hmm. So the team that worked with me helped identify areas that could really use that money, often where the stories were hard to tell on television. And we had a major response to Hurricane Katrina and other disasters using the public funds. Mm-hmm. Oprah brings so much integrity to everything she does, and that included the philanthropy. So what we did really well and above board. All of the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed.
So you were able to raise money from some of the show's viewers.
So show's viewers sent money in every week when the segment aired, or whenever there was a disaster and she talked about philanthropy. She would get letters that said, I found $5 under my car in the Walmart parking lot, and I knew it was God telling me send that money to Oprah. I mean, very heartwarming, wonderful.
I'm sure.
And really connected people. Mm-hmm. Who felt like she was going to use it well. So we had a lot of responsibility, and I think that any philanthropist is managing the public trust. Is responsible for the public trust, because philanthropic dollars don't belong to anyone.
Once you take that tax donation, that is public money. Federal government owns that, and we just get to steward it.
That's right.
But so you were able to raise a lot of money, which is great. Celebrities have an incredible power, especially a celebrity. I mean, there's celebrities and then there's Oprah. And so that's awesome. But was she also contributing her own money? She is quite wealthy herself.
She had a private foundation.
And did you?
That we worked with also. Everything
these were separate?
She did with a high level of integrity.
Was her own giving different
Separate
than
from the public charity,
the stuff that with from the?
Yeah, many high net worth people have multiple vehicles for giving.
Yes.
Often there are various vehicles like donor-advised funds, trusts, private foundations. People write checks, but they also use their intellectual capital. They use their convening power. They use assets that are at their fingertips that they have that other people don't necessarily have. And Oprah had this wonderful platform, but many donors have great platforms. It's so much of philanthropy is about identifying what your platform is and how you're going to use it as effectively as possible.
My grandmother, who ran the Moss Foundation before me, it was called something else then, because her name is not Moss. But she used to say that we like to use all of our currencies. And that's something that really stuck with me. We can make very, very small grants. We are not Winfrey's, but I can almost always connect you with somebody that can help you more than I can. And so I like to think about my network capital, my Rolodex. Another thing Grandma used to say is there's always more money in the Rolodex than in the bank account. And that is true for everybody. So for as much money as Oprah has, right, she can make 2 phone calls and find people with more money, right?
Well, I think funders can do that, and you're right about the Rolodex. Well, I haven't actually thought about it like that. It's about leveraging big ideas, and often people who have small amounts of capital to invest, when they invest intellectual capital, social capital, when they really focus, that small amount of money can do as much as a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And I think that we need to be aware of how much each of us can use our own platforms for social change.
So it was a long time ago, and I may be fuzzy on some of the details. If Raj is listening, he'll email me and he'll correct it because he'll remember everything that happened. But we would have weekly development meetings, and I remember one time when we were talking about the Oprah's foundation, and we were considering what should we ask for, right? And I think what we eventually asked for was actually not money at all. I think we said, can we have an hour of Oprah's time this year? And we'll come up with a couple of lists and just have you make a couple phone calls. I don't remember exactly how that happened, but I do remember those conversations. Was that something that she would do for charity? Say, I'll make a couple calls for you, or I'll do this for you, or do that?
Again, I won't speak specifically about Oprah.
Yes, of course. Yes.
I can say that that's what donors do, and when philanthropy is done really well, that's how it works, right? It's about leveraging what you have. Philanthropy doesn't mean I'm going to give you money from my 501c3 private foundation. It means the love of humanity. And thinking about it from that perspective, there's so many ways to enter into it. There's this great saying by Larry Kushner, entrances to holiness are everywhere. And I think that I really love that. It's about being able to see opportunities and use the assets that you have to affect change through those opportunities.
That's amazing. And so, at the end of your 9 years with Oprah, what did you do after that?
I moved to help run a private foundation owned by a large Chicago-based family, and I worked with them, helping them think about integration of generations and building out their philanthropy. And I loved every moment of it.
Mm-hmm. So this is well over a decade of you being really at, major philanthropy. This is big time stuff. This is not the Moss Family Foundation, right? For all of the great impact we've had over there, you are on a much other level. And I wonder, and I assume that you probably also do your own personal giving, or maybe are involved in things that are at a smaller scale. And do you think about big philanthropy differently than small philanthropy?
Oh, that's such a good question.
Thank you.
I don't. I don't think about it differently. We were just in a session where they asked what the one word that you would have that would describe your passion, and while I didn't actually stay there, the word that I came up with was generosity. I'm really passionate about generosity. Not my own, but helping other people find theirs. So I do a lot of coaching.
Well, you're in the right business.
Members. I do a lot of coaching. I help foundations think about all of their assets and creating asset maps that show where their assets, their financial and their non-financial assets are, and what they've been given to over a period of years. And I help families take family values and contextualize them across generations, so that just because a traditionalist, the founder of the family wealth, had been giving to a hospital for many years, doesn't mean that the third generation should continue to give to that hospital or wants to. But if you dig a little bit deeper and start scratching the surface, you see that there was a value in that gift. It might be that someone was given some kind of care. Maybe it was neonatal care. And once you're able to extract that and then contextualize it, well, what does that mean in 2018? Right? What does it mean to work on neonatal care in 2018? Is it a capital gift, or is it some kind of systemic change? Can we start thinking about how pregnant women take care of themselves? Can we start thinking about providing systemic change in communities that don't have access to prenatal health care? And that's just one example. There are a lot of ways to look at contextualizing values, but I sit on the Board of Visitors at Indiana University's Lilly Family School of Philanthropy.
Sure, yeah,
and
big deal.
a
great biennial study with U.S. Trust every year that really talks about how next generation
I think
members,
I've read it.
second and third generation members, are very interested in the values that their parents and their grandparents had, just not actualizing them the same.
I mean, that's as a third. I'm the fourth generation to run my family philanthropy, which means I sometimes give money away that was originally earned it could have been as early as the 1920s by a man who I've never met, who died 50 years before I was born. And you're absolutely, it's important to me to solve. I think the most important thing to me is to solve problems in the world today, right? And many of those problems didn't exist for him.
So what were his values that you have incorporated?
Well, in particular, and this is all sides of my family. My mother is Jewish, my father is not, but both sides of the family valued education, probably really, really top of the list. My father was our first in his family to go to college, and then he drastically exceeded that. Went on to get a master's degree and then a PhD and then a second PhD. So just being the first in his family to go to college was not important enough for him. My parents have 3 PhDs. Is one of my favorite sentences to say. My mother is at Duke University, and before that, the two of them taught at Colby together. And clearly, all the generations before them instilled education in them. They committed their lives to being a teacher. I actually tried to be a teacher myself. That was my first job. I learned later at Seed that 9 out of 10 first-year teachers don't become second-year teachers, which is, and I think we can all figure out why. It's a difficult job and it's underpaid. So,
what a great platform for you in the work that you're doing right now. Mm-hmm. So you're still teaching in some ways. You're just not teaching in public education.
Well, the nonprofit I founded, the Unfunded List, our mission is to educate the public about philanthropy, right? We are, and thank you for joining us on the podcast. I think a lot of the people who send me unfunded proposals wouldn't have this opportunity to have this conversation with you about philanthropy, and so this is the chance for them to, hopefully they'll listen in and they'll learn as well. That's why we call it open. That's why we call the podcast Open Door Philanthropy. We're opening doors. Oftentimes, the reality of fundraising is closed doors, quite the opposite. And so what I'd like to ask you is how did you prefer to be approached as a donor advisor? Did you only identify organizations and then fund them, or
did we ask for proposals? Did we request proposals,
yes,
or did we accept proposals over the transom?
If there was someone out there doing something that they identified you as a target, right? And I don't remember how Seed got on your radar originally, but because Raj got invited on, of course, yes. So is that how you like to be? You had people on the show first, and then.
So in my career, I've worked both ways. Mm-hmm. What I'm helping people do now is identify the issue that they really care about, or the issues that they really care about, in that frame of contextualized values. If you can get there, then you can figure out what the process is, and the more clarity you have for grant seekers, the better it is for them, because nobody wants to waste their time going to someone who's not going to fund them. Many funders are interested in particular organizations, and I often try and help them think a little bit beyond the organization, that it's not about that organization, it's about what problem does that organization approach, and thinking more systemically about problem solving than keeping an organization alive. Now that said, there's some great funders of strong organizations, and They need that. They need general operating funding in order to survive. So there's a balance. But when families are working together, my goal is to get them to come up with what it is, what problems there are in the world that they want to solve, that they're passionate about, that are meaningful to them, and then look at the universe of options. And think, then drill down and think about, well, what's the geography? Right? What's the exact issue that they're interested in? And we do a lot of education with donors to help them understand. And often the nonprofit organizations are partners in that. So I think it's the responsibility of nonprofits to educate donors and to do their homework and find out who's funding what. And it's the responsibility of donors to be really clear about what they're funding.
Absolutely. Very well said. I imagine that you have other sessions and other things to attend to, but just a couple more closing questions.
Sure.
The firm you're.
This is fun, by the way.
Oh, of course, thank you. Fun for me too. Your firm now. You're doing the same thing. You're advising donors and that sort of thing.
Crowland Consulting, and I am advising high net worth families and some institutions on philanthropy and helping them think through how to give really well and how to be accountable and generous at the same time.
Have you ever had a job other than donor advisor?
Yes.
Did you do something before?
My degree is in broadcast journalism.
Okay, so were you a journalist?
I worked with major magazines in New York for a long time.
Magazines.
Time magazine.
I'm a millennial, so.
Yeah, I know. It sounds like it was in the 90s. Yeah.
No, I'm one of the older millennials. I remember magazines.
You remember magazines?
I still get the Atlantic.
I've also helped start a school foundation prior to coming into this, so I understood what it was to do grant making.
You did some.
And I've sat on boards. I sat on the board of a mental health organization. Now, as I mentioned, the Indiana University's Lilly School of Family Philanthropy. I'm on the board of the Women's Philanthropy Institute, and this one is my favorite, the Poetry Foundation in Chicago.
The Poetry Foundation.
And so the Poetry Foundation started as a very small foundation, publishing poetry magazine. They were the first to publish T.S. Eliot, and the first to publish.
Not bad. I've read him.
Right. And then in the early 2000s, they got a bequest. They didn't even know who the bequest was from at first because the editors had been communicating with this poet, as they did with anybody who submitted poetry. They never published any of her poetry, and she was sending her poetry in under her married name, not her maiden name, and her maiden name was Ruth Lilly. So when she died, she left the Poetry Foundation $200 million.
Wow.
And it was a fascinating thing to watch it being stewarded.
That's a lot of money for poetry.
And the Poetry Foundation is bringing the written and the spoken word into communities that really benefit from arts all over the country and, in fact, all over the world.
I think there are a lot of people that think poetry is nice, a thing, right? I don't really like it or whatever, and they don't necessarily think of it as a particularly important thing. I think I couldn't disagree more. I write poems myself. I learned long ago that they are not any good. But that's not.
Do you have $200 million?
Not quite. But I don't think you necessarily write poems because you're writing them for other people. I enjoy writing them for my own thing. I read them to myself. I do know. I remember I went to writing camp when I was a kid, and there was I forget. I think I just went because it was summer, and this is the only way you get out of the house is sleepover camp, and my parents were professors, so I had to do academic sleepover camp. I couldn't do the sports ones like everybody else. So I went to Bates. They were at Colby, and I went to Bates for 2 weeks for writing camp, and that's where I started a life of writing poems. Again, terrible poems. But it's good to spend some time thinking differently than you normally think, right? And having the freedom to write a bad poem, right? Or paint a bad painting, or it doesn't all have to be high art, right? I think all of us should be doing something of that sort, and I feel really bad for people who don't have any sort of artistic outlet. So that's awesome.
Poetry brings communities together, and the Poetry Foundation has several readings, a couple of readings a week. where they bring in often communities of color, Latino communities, immigrant communities, Middle Eastern communities to share the poems and the richness of the language of those communities. And it's a really powerful thing to see people brought together by images that are comfortable for them and familiar, and sometimes images that are disruptive. And I think that the spoken word and the written word can do a lot for us as we think about moving into a new era.
Who is your favorite poet?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask.
Did you? Yeah, mind reader over here.
You know, I actually read a poem at a board meeting not too long ago by Derek Walcott, which is called Love After Love, and it's one of my favorite poems. And it's really about self-love.
What was it? What was it called again?
Love After Love by Derek Walcott.
Awesome. I'll have to check that out. I asked, I might as well answer. I really like Billy Collins for folks who are around today. But I think probably ultimately, and this is a big cliche, but like I'm a big Walt Whitman fan.
You're from New England.
Yes, yeah, it's kind of, and I've been to Walden a few times. I've walked all the way around the pond while reading from Walden Pond. And my father's a U.S. history professor, and I am actually named after Thoreau. My name's David, and a lot of people don't know that his name was David as well. But he didn't like being called David, and so he told people, I'm glad I'm not Henry. But he's a big fan of my dad's. And he was kind of I think there might be poems that he wrote, but other things as well. I actually really like his. I'm from Maine, and I forget which book that is that Thoreau wrote, but he basically walked up to Maine and then walked around for a while and wrote down all the plants and stuff that he found. As a little boy in Maine, I loved that book. I used to go out and try to find those plants. And, that was awesome. And so it's really been a pleasure having you here.
What does the Moss Foundation give to, and how do you make decisions about giving grants?
At the moment, we fund the nonprofit that I founded, the Unfunded List. I worked at nonprofits consistently before this, and we would often, and I tried this with varying levels of success, fund the places where I worked. Sometimes I would work there, I would realize like this is something we need money for and we're never going to get it, right? And on a couple of times I made restricted grants for to improve things that made my job easier.
Okay, so let me just stop you right now. You probably don't want to put that on the podcast.
I edit these.
Good, because that's conflict of interest.
Well, no, we've never been an actual 501c3. This is just a checking account. I can do whatever I want with the money. No, but it was even if it's not a legal conflict. You're right. It was awkward, right? We made gifts to Seed while I was there, and I think Raj is a very, very good fundraiser, and he was able to, and I kind of got spoiled working for him because it was very professional. I still worked for him. It was very clear, right? But I was still I still felt stewarded well as a donor at the same time. He was just very good at doing that. And some of my later supervisors, nothing ever blew up or anything, but it created for an awkward dynamic. Yeah. I was on the board of something called the Slingshot Fund.
Oh, I know Slingshot well. Yeah.
I've been involved.
Oh,
sure, yeah. So Sharna, I was a member of Grand Street, which is a network of young Jews involved in philanthropy. And that's how I found out about Slingshot in the really early days. I think I did the first cycle, or maybe I was joined for the second cycle, possibly. And then I was on the board of Slingshot for 6 years, I think. I left when I turned 30. We had a board meeting at Google headquarters in San Francisco. I made this big speech about how the board of Slingshot should only be people in their 20s. There aren't enough opportunities for leadership for young Jews in their 20s that are genuine, that actually involve the ability to give real grants to projects. I think I am stepping down, and I was picturing myself as the General Cincinnatus, right, or George Washington retiring after 2 terms. My ego has not subsided since. All of the board members who were there for that meeting are still on the board. None of them have stepped down, and everybody is old there. And
Leslie Matza?
No, there might be some new board members. In fact, Lana Fern, née Wolfschen, just joined our board, the Unfunded List. Unfunded List is somewhat similar. A lot of the stuff I learned in that board experience there, and particularly the power of what I call the power of the honorable mention, right? So the groups in the guide, most of them didn't get grants from us, but all of them got extra funding from being in the guide. right? And so when I originally wanted to make sure I gave feedback to unfunded proposals. That's the main thing we do here. It's probably what we spend most. I think Margaret would agree. That's what we spend most of our time on. The administrative lift is heavy, but worth it. The feedback we deliver is very useful for these folks. Beyond that, beyond the feedback, want to make the program as abundant as possible, and so that's why we have the unfunded list as well, which increasingly is for when we see a proposal that has improved quite a bit. Most of the folks on the list this round have applied to us several times, and we were like, well, you're getting much better. This is a much better proposal than the last round, and I think that's the right time to start introducing them to funders and stuff like that. These people have figured this out, and we've had quite a bit of success on that front. Some of the groups on our list we've connected them with six-figure grants. We look forward to doing a lot more of that stuff. And at the end of every episode, and if you say no, we will just cut this question out. About twice a year, I get unfunded proposals from people. We have a large evaluation committee that I assign to, and I ask them to send me their feedback. If I get some proposals in this round that I think you might be helpful to, would you mind if I send some of them over to you?
Not at all. If I can help, if I've got the time, I'd be more than happy to. One of the things I really love doing, aside from things like this, is coaching young professionals. And it's I think it's so important, especially for emerging women in philanthropy, to help them understand what the landscape looks like, and then help emerging men understand what it means to be a male ally. And work together. So one of the projects that I'm working on currently that's a really exciting project is a website called glassceiling.com. So glassceiling.com is for women in the workplace, and there are lots of interviews, and I've actually done the interviews with men, talking about their experiences of bias in the workplace and how they've felt and how they've come to feel the way they do. And then I'm also working on a professional development for credit course, a seminar in Chicago that takes place on the 23rd of February in ethics, and it provides 3 credits for lawyers, accountants, and for insurance professionals. And it's an original play that's being written about a family that has advisors around it, and the kinds of decisions and dilemmas that they have in their lives as they're deciding about philanthropy.
Wow.
So it's super fun. And there's more of that to come. So if anyone's interested, they can look on entertain2.com.
Entertain to educate. I like that. That's a good name.
Entertain to educate. And glass ceiling is glassceiling.com.
Okay. We have been speaking for 26 minutes now.
Oh no.
This has been thoroughly enjoying. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Thank you for signing the release.
Yes, absolutely.
I hope you enjoyed it.